May I now welcome the panelists, including Zef Paci, Rina Gosalci, Gusia, and Marielsa Castro, to the floor. Zef Paci will be moderating the panel. He is a professor of art history and painting at the University of Tirana in Albania, and I leave it up to him to introduce the other panelists.
Thank you for your presence here, all the personalities and friends. I'm starting this first panel discussion about alternative education models and the collective construction of learning. The first, I introduce Rina Gosalci. It comes from the field of psychology and social sciences, with a contribute as a researcher and project manager in the field of education, leading programs of education for the community. She has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and a Master of Science in Cognitive Neuropsychology from University of Sheffield, Thessaloniki. She studied Politics and Economics of the Free Society at Charles University, Faculty of Social Science, Prague. She was project manager at Kino Armata, later worked as a program advisor for the Kosovar Youth Council. She was a projects coordinator for the Directorate of Culture at Municipality of Prishtina, managing the institutional responsibilities and formal agreements for the development and implementation of the Manifesta 14 Prishtina biennial program. And so in different parts, the collaboration with UNDP for the revitalization and refunctionalization of ex-Hifzi Suleimani Library and now Center for Narrative Practice, managing and coordinating art in public space, project including the implementation of 4 artistic interventions in public spaces of Pristina by renowned Kosovar artists as a way of repurposing and reclaiming public space. She participated in different conferences, and as in 3rd and 4th International Conference on Children's Health, Well-being, Education, Rights. Actually is working as an education project manager for Manifesta. And so, Gusia is head Department of Sociology at the University of Pristina. As a sociologist and feminist scholar, her research has focused on topics of gender, nationalism, activism, representation, public space, memory, and violence. She was a...
That's enough.
Okay.
That's enough. I think that sums me up.
Okay. Marielsa Castro works between pedagogical and curatorial practices and researches of art and architecture. She's an architect graduated from Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City and holds a master's degree in art, design, and the public domain from Harvard University. She's currently an associate curator at Museo Jumex and an associate of COPIA, Cooperative Practice for the Transformation of the Territory. Between 2017 and 2019, she was head of public and educational services at the Art Museum of the Banco de la República in Bogota, Colombia. Additionally, for 3 consecutive years, she directed the independent project Liga, Espacio para Arquitectura, with the aim of promoting the exchange of ideas and research on Latin American architecture through a cycle of site-specific exhibition. She is currently professor at the Architecture School of Tecnológico de Monterrey, and co-founder of COPIA, as you said, a transdisciplinary cooperative that works on and through the limits of architecture. Later will be the presentation of Pablo Helguera, that we will have it online. So I give the speech to Rina about her experience working, because all these conferences about how artistical education works, not by transferring knowledge, but being together, generating knowledge. So this experience that our panelists are sharing with us. Thank you, Rina.
So, hello everyone. I'm Rina Gosalci, as Mr. Zef Paci very nicely presented me. It is a great pleasure to be here today with you, especially because we've done a tremendous work in the Education Department of Manifesta for the last 2 years. So it's great, I'm feeling very honored to be able to present to you today exactly what we've done and all of the projects we've been working on, all of the research we've conducted in order to actually be present here today and and have a lot to actually tell you about. I think taking that the space and the reason why we're here, I believe that we all agree that education is quite a fundamental factor for all of our societies to progress and develop. And what is even more important and more of a crucial factor is to have education systems which are flexible and adapt to the needs and the changes and the needs of the youth and the new generations. And as such, that's also kind of the basis of all of the Department of Education of Manifesta. So Manifesta, in each of its editions, creates a program which is tailored to fit to the culture and to the public in which the program is created. We know Manifesta is a nomadic biennial, and as such, it has a great responsibility to do a lot of research before creating a program. So the idea is that each education program of each edition of Manifesta, it actually is tailored to fit exactly to the needs of the youth, to the needs of the different audiences, and to the needs of the participants and to the people which are engaged with our programs. Another very important factor of our program is that we want to have as much of a diverse target group as possible, and this in turn also translates to this diversity component and to the engagement of communities in all of our projects and activities which we have been implementing and we will be continuing to implement also within the newly created interdisciplinary center, the Center for Narrative Practice. Another component which we believe why is it important to have such a alternative educational program related to art and culture in Kosovo specifically is because young people and young generations, they in Kosovo especially, apart from being somewhat exposed to art and to culture in general, we all need to have this very thorough education in order to appreciate art, in order to be able to appreciate our own cultural heritage, and in order to be able to also create and produce art, especially for children and young adults. So, as such, in each, as I also mentioned, and also as Ms. Hedvig Fien very nicely explained at the beginning of today's conference, the Education Department of Manifesta is spread into three main programs. The education program, which includes formal and non-formal education, and the intertwining of the two. The community program, through which different projects are implemented, but the main project is also the space of OASA, or the Children and Young Adults Library, which is also the headquarters of the community and education program that were implemented. The third program, the last but not the least, is the mediation program, which is mediation as a practice has been in our society in Kosovo, but has been introduced and has been used in a different context, so more in historical terms. However, cultural education is a very new topic and concept and practice nowadays, for which I personally think that it was a very important aspect that we needed to develop further in our city and in our country, especially through the mediation school, which we have been training for 5-6 months, a group of 10 young individuals on how to be cultural mediators. This in turn has also posed a great opportunity for new job employments also in this market. The main objectives of the education program of Manifesta 14 Prishtina are basically to widen the perspectives on contemporary culture, contemporary art, and to push forward new educational and cultural policies. To engage students, schools, and youth in the development phase of the project. This is also something which is quite an important element, let's say, because usually all projects which are developed for children, they're not developed with children. And this is something which we really wanted to kind of transform as a new methodology to also be introduced in a formal or non-formal education. Another important objective is to widen and to diversify the public and the audiences, and also to have the audiences not only as passive observers, but more as direct engaging participants in all of our programs. Lastly, in relation to the mediation program and the mediators, as I also mentioned before, it is very crucial that we've developed this mediation school, which has pushed forward the capacity building of 10 young individuals who are now professionals at mediation practice, cultural mediation practice. So, my presentation today is going to be more or less focused into these three main components, which lately I've also actually personally just found out that there are three components of the education system which are important all throughout the world, not only in Kosovo or Europe or in the Balkans. It is important that we, all of us who are educators, who are social service workers, pedagogues, psychologists who do work with children and with young generations, I would actually propose to take into account these three approaches in order to have the children develop as much as possible on fields that they're mostly interested in. So to get back to the Manifesta education program, the research-based approach has been one of the most crucial aspects of the whole program that you can see today, be that from exhibitions, be that from artistic or urban interventions, education activities, workshops, performances, and so on. The Manifesta program has been developed research for the last 2 years in order to understand the culture consumption, to understand the needs of the general public in Prishtina and in general in Kosovo, in order to prepare and to develop a program which not only reflects to their needs, but also serves as a way to help to develop further skills and capabilities of young people in our country. The second important approach is the community-driven approach. So how to include as many communities as possible in our programs, in decision-making processes when it comes to culture, art, and education. So from 2 years ago, Manifesta for Team Prishtina has developed a series of researches from different kinds of topics, and beginning with expectation workshops, which were organized with people of different backgrounds to see what are their expectations of the program and so on. The second most important research that has been done is this qualitative research. It's called the citizen consultations, which includes a series of 8 different focus groups organized again with people of different backgrounds, people from different communities, age groups, different ethnicities, on topics such as the use of public space, inclusion in decision-making processes. We've talked to the neighbors around the ex or the former Hifz Suleimani library to see what exactly is it that they would like to have in the library which was used by them in the past. We've talked to the neighborhoods, to the neighborhood and to the neighbors around the brick factory exactly for the same reason, because we wanted to convey a program which exactly fits, first of all, to the communities who frequent these spaces more often. We've had a focus group also organized on well-being. We've had a focus group with a theme of how to include Roma, Ashkali, and Egyptian communities, which was organized with these communities in Fushkosova. We've had another focus group with Serbian community in Gračanica, and to see in what way can we create such structures and methodologies which intertwine all of these topics, all of these needs of the general population in our city and country. So we managed to come to get a lot of information, which is currently, actually, it will be finalized as a document for anyone who wants to have as a full report. We managed to gather information on accessibility of people with special needs in buildings, or their inclusion in decision-making processes, or their inclusion in the education system. We understood a lot of how people perceive public space and what mechanisms can we use to influence that and to change that perception. And so on, basically. So I will tell you a bit more throughout my presentation. Another research we did is the collective memory mapping of Hifz Suleimani. This has been done in regards to the past of the ex-Hifz Suleimani library. In order to move on forward to develop a program there, it was for us very crucial to understand the meaning of it, the function of it in the past, why was it important for the people who frequented it, for the children who went and borrowed books there, for the neighbors around it, and so on. And we managed to understand that the space actually was quite a multi-ethnic center, because also the area around the now Center for Narrative Practice is a multi-ethnic neighborhood, and we really created a program that we wanted to keep that component strongly also very visible and evident in the program nowadays. Moreover, we did also the mapping of subculture movements in Prishtina, Tirana, and Skopje. These two have also been a very tremendous research, which are also shown in a publication that you can find it also at Grand Hotel, or if someone is interested can also let us know about it. It's a beautiful publication. It has a lot of information on different subculture movements, on people who were important actors in these different eras from 1990s to nowadays, for music, for art, for painting, and so on. And the last research we did is the field research with schools, where this was actually the basis of the schools program that we developed, which includes the schools project and includes the schools guided tours. The field research in schools was done with teachers of schools, with psychologists, directly with students, and all school staff which are engaged in pedagogy of children. I will move on. So, In regards to the field research we did with schools, the schools project was developed, as I said, in collaboration with directly with school students, teachers, and with school directors. We also collaborated closely with the Kosovo Youth Council, as they are one of the leading organizations ensuring the quality of education of students and children in the whole Kosovo. We also collaborated with the Directorate of Education in Prishtina and in Fush Kosova. So in a way or another, this was kind of the intertwining of this formal and non-formal education systems. The schools project was developed to increase the curiosity of young people and children to explore their local cultural heritage, and it includes 3 different methodologies on how teachers can implement these extracurricular activities with children to explore the past, the present, and the future. So in a sense, it will also encourage the students to be active citizens in their neighborhoods on what can be done, for instance, with a building which was abandoned for the last 10 or 20 years. And they can give ideas and they can brainstorm and see what can be done with this object in the future or with this public space in the future. So currently, we're planning the training sessions for 130 teachers, which are supposed to continue to implement these extracurricular activities together with students, also after Manifesta ends by the end of next week. So this is one of the sustainable projects which we're also collaborating now closely with Kosovo for distance education to perhaps be able to include this as part of the e-curriculum of students. Yeah. So in terms of the mediation program, as I mentioned before, we've had the mediation program, and the mediators are one of let's say, we're very proud of the work that has been done to actually not only train these mediators, but for them to be capable and to be very confident to carry out mediated tours with different kinds of groups, be that from different backgrounds, different age groups. So they were trained for a series of 6 months by our very own education team and also by external professionals in pedagogy or psychology or public speaking professionals and so on. So the idea was for them they are kind of the critical point between the Manifesta artistic program and the different audiences that engage with it. So the role of the mediators in our context is to create this link between what it means, for instance, to have an artistic exhibition and Grand Hotel. What does it mean to have an artistic intervention in our local cultural context? So in a way or another, they served a very critical and crucial point on relating the general public, the international public, to our culture, but at the same time also connecting our local audiences to these internationally renowned artists and contemporary artworks. Apart from the mediation school, the mediation team are also very much engaged in 2 other programs in the family program, which is organized at OASA, the Children and Young Adults Library, which is in the Center for Narrative Practice, and also the community games, community programs. So the mediators are also ideating a lot of activities. They're carrying out a lot of activities with different communities from different age groups. Yeah, so the tours are also offered in various languages. This is also a strong component in terms of this inclusion aspect that we take of high importance. The tours are offered in Albanian, English, Serbian, Roma language, Turkish, German, and Italian. So lastly, I will keep it short because I've extended a bit my presentation. We created this education and community space called OASA, which is a section of the Center for Narrative Practice. So the center has been created directly with the students and with children, and through also the research that we've done before and through also research that we've done in schools, but also the library itself is developed and it's created in such a way that Children were giving suggestions of books they would like to read, or they would tell us why they were not reading books. So we wanted to kind of get ideas from them, get ideas and get suggestions also from writers, from education specialists, from people from civil society who work in different social topics and so on. So all of the books are kind of more, let's say, up to date and fit the desires and interests of children and young adults. We offer books from 4 years old to adults or young adults in general. I invite you all to come and see the space also personally, because it's literally an oasis in between the infrastructure of the city. Moreover, we offer a lot of workshops, creative workshops from different kinds, be that one-day workshops on creative writing, or book reading events, or illustration, painting, animation, stop motion animation, and so on, to these more long-term programs which we recently developed, which are going to stay in the space also after Manifesta, which is the animation program, theater program, film photography program, which we also created the newest darkroom in our city, which can be used by the public, and and the ecology program. So these are kind of the long-term programs which we started already developing. This week and next week we will be finishing with the first session of these programs. So in general, this serves as a space where parents, children can come, hang out. Children can also have fun, but at the same time they get educated through these non-formal creative ways. I want to thank you for your time, and I'm sorry if I extended my presentation a bit. And thank you.
I wanted to say that after the panelists will show their approach, please feel free to ask questions, and not only for the friends here live, but also online for the audience that is following online. Now I'm giving the word to Linda Gusia, that will tell us about the particular experience of Hertita Schoolhouse as a reaction against the privation. Her work, I guess, started firstly perhaps as a real witness, because she was a pupil, a student at this school, and after followed long research realized in a collaboration with a colleague of her. It's a story of a family that offered their house property as a shelter for a school community. How a private place become a public one, hosting a community who want to learn. Please, Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Zef. Thank you for the invitation. I will try to be brief, since it's important for me to engage in conversation with Manifesta public especially. I will not be as poetic as some of previous speaker. I will try to be structural at least. So in May 2018, municipality of Prishtina announced that the high school that saw the graduation of more than 10 generations of high school students will be turned into a museum. The high school existed between 1992 and just until the NATO bombing began in 1999. The house is really among 3,000 places that exist in Kosovo and were used as classrooms during this period of time. Different basements, different garages, and mostly living rooms that the school system was developed. Known as Hertita Schoolhouse, this now museum in the making was also, as said, my former high school. It has been a location that I felt invested personally, emotionally, and intellectually for more than a decade, since every spring and every autumn, fall semester, we would take our students in the site in our attempt to build the communities of knowledge about around the sites of memory that are silenced, are forgotten, and that will tell the different experiences of what happened in Kosovo. I firmly believe that you cannot really understand what happened during the war without understanding the 1990s and the breakup of Yugoslavia. So this was sort of our attempt to talk about it, our attempt to create communities of knowledge around it. I hate to, when I'm asked to give like a brief description about what's happened, it's always problematic to do it in a minute. I will attempt to do this in a minute. So when Kosovo's autonomy, as one of the 8 constitutive units of Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, was forcefully and illegally revoked in 1989, state-imposed special measures applied very violently and very militarily. Martial law was declared since March 1989, and it lasted until the NATO bombing. Important to remind that. And the complete segregation along the ethnic lines begun. It was almost like apartheid state system. These measures, in addition to this martial law and police violence and brutality, included a segregation of school along ethnic lines. It started with my primary school in Dardania when the wall was built between Serbs and Albanian students. This was 89. Then the director of the schools were replaced forcefully and illegally. And dramatic revisions of curricula and elimination of Albanian language, especially in University of Prishtina and higher education, begun. Teachers, community leaders, parents, and this was, of course, enforced also with sort of militarized police help of non-access to school facilities that began especially in September 91. So in front of our schools, there were police not allowing Albanian school children to enter in. The 91 semester we spent home. What happened during this time is very organic initiatives, mostly of women school teachers, a fact that always gets somehow omitted and forgotten, they started gathering their school children into their house or went to the house of the school children and started a very sort of organic organizing of the school system. In January 92, seeing that the school, we have no access to the school, we searched, the community leaders searched for this alternative ways of expanding this sort of organic initiatives of school children. So this is very briefly the context, the historical context of house school system. So therefore, when the municipality announced that this, our former high school, and the colleague that Zef mentioned is my comrade and my dear friend Nita Luci that we have done all the work together with, we saw it as a really important opening to think with and about museums. 2018 was really a time when globally we started talking about decolonizing museums, started talking about making museums sort of spaces of engagement, spaces when public can engage, and we can move away from museums as being sort of static, physical, and move into sort of more exchange and interactive, plural, democratic, and possibly maybe museums and spaces for social justice and emancipation. So for us as teachers, we really wanted to engage with methodology. We really wanted to engage with tools on how to do this. And of course, students were a big part of all this process. It was around 30, 40 students that took part, sociology, anthropology maybe, mostly, that took part in this. There was more than 30 months of collecting data, collecting private archive material, collecting public material, digitalizing all the new important newspaper. We developed different kind of allergies, trying to spend our time in archives. We tried to translate and look at the documentaries or films of private footages of people that wanted to share and really digitalize it and made it accessible for the public. Of course, this was very much student-centered and youth-centered because for us, mainly engaging with the past was not really based on this romantic, sentimental feeling of, oh, look how we suffered and look what we have been through. It was really a reaction. It was impulsive reaction to, oh, this school is ours, and we want to participate in building the narrative around it. We want to disrupt also this sort of linear narrative, this narrative of hero-victim, and wanted to create a new sort of commemorative grammar, really, around how commemoration happens, how these spaces are rethought. Because students were really very active part of all of this, we also wanted, our engagement, me and Nita engagement with all these different projects, I will talk about the 4 different projects, was really in the wake of why do we need to know? As Tosca Saliu, one of the students that participated in the process, asked, why do we need to know? Why? I mean, we live in a time of global environmental crisis. We live in a time when our life and our future is really endangered. And why should we know about the past? And this question really is to the core of us as teachers, as people who try to invent pedagogical tools of how to deal with the past, is why? What can we teach them? And for me, in the time of these crises, the most important lesson is what is the combination? And you see it everywhere in different conflicts. Authoritarian leaders who really drive on the fear of people, economical crisis, and changing and crumbling ideologies. And this combination, we believe, we see it everywhere. We see it in Ukraine. We see it in all the wars. We saw it in the Second World War as well. So for us, dealing with the past was really talking about what allows these conflicts to happen, what makes it possible, what makes it thrive, and how can we react to it. But more ever in the times of crisis like this, it is about building communities and solidarities. And we strongly believe that house school was really about solidarities and community. I think that this is one of the most important lessons that Hetita House School needs to tell us, is that these communities come together and build and strive in solidarity. And I think that's a lesson that we need to repeat in times of crisis, and it's a lesson for all and can travel globally. So when the house school was about to turn to a museum for 4.5 years now, in the making, we wanted to be proactive. We wanted to also the story that is told to be the story of agency, the story of us having fun, the story of us making a school newspaper, story of us having the coolest rock alternative bands ever. So we wanted a story that is not the story of suffering, but it's a story of agency, survival, and resilience. So this is how we build our projects around it. So it was design our projects around it. So it was 4 different projects. The first one was in 2008, making the Museum of Education, which is really individual grant of AHRC, GCRF grant, UK-based grants, and in this process, this was like our initial work. The second, the second project, we really wanted to experiment a little bit with digital. It was also the beginning of pandemic, and we really realized that we really need to take it to the digital and think about virtual museums, and also the house was very much destroyed. And as I was reading rereading Benjamin, the sort of aura of the time and rebringing that aura of the time into museums, into these experiences became something that could only be done with technology. So we began doing this photogrammetry of the school, trying to engage with different digital methodologies. And in Respace, in another project, we really tried to go a little bit towards art, which was problematic and slippery, and use found sound, use sensory ethnography, use different kind of methodology, and really make our students uncomfortable in trying to do this. We worked a little bit with animation, and so this was Respace, and I'll share the links with you. And then in the setting like this, I met Vedat Husulic, a VR animator, professor, originally from Bosnia in England, and he was presenting a VR game on Mostar River, and I was like, yes, this is it. This is what we need to do. And we talked, and I have all this material that we have collected with our students and with Nita for all these years, and how can we make House School a VR experience? And so we started and created this pilot project of VR, which is really based on this, curated around 3 storylines, sort of Kosovo and former Yugoslavia, the context of 1990, and the schoolhouse itself. And it can be watched independently. And here we really wanted to put in practice all that thinking and tried to see it as a tool, VR and museum as a learning tool. We tested with 68 young people. We had a long testing period here in Armata, a different background. We tested it with educators, or we would chase our colleagues around the hall and just say, oh, just put the VR on, and how do you feel? Can we use it in the class? The colleagues were not super enthusiastic about it, but the students were, which was promising. So we have this VR Oculus. Whoever is interested to see, we'll have a showing of it in Center for Narrative Practice on Sunday, I think. So you can see what we did with the VR set. So for us, and today's topic is really thinking about and with museums and thinking about these spaces and what these spaces mean to us. As what they say, implicated subject, for us it becomes an important part also to ethically reflect on our positionality of, how are we speaking, who are we speaking to? This is why I had the whole first part filmed all the time, all the workshop. I realized I talk too much, and I don't allow other people, so this was the biggest revelation of all this filming and hours of watching the research. But so it was really a process of also self-reflection and process of how can we, turn our own personal experiences and stories into knowledge production, and how can we also make it travel and meet other stories and other similar contexts. I'll end with this now.
Thank you, Rina, for your
Thank you, Linda, for your passion and in your research and in your challenge for this museum. And now we have the presentation of Marielsa Castro Vizara, and she's going to tell us about these experiences with Jumex Museo, Museos en Común, and to share with us this idea in between public and common. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Jordi Ferreiro, for introducing me to Manifesta. Thank you, Manifesta, for having me here, Zef for the kind introduction, and Linda and Rina for sharing your amazing practice. So a video is going to be running while unfortunately the video is in Spanish, but I will try to tell about the project while you can see the image of this amazing community that I've been working with. So Museos en Común, museos in common, or common museums, or museums in commons. There's probably not like only a correct way of translating the name of the project. The word común has a particular context in Latin America that distanced itself from the English concept of commons. And I would like to introduce how we the Museo Jumex, understand lo común for this project. The notion of the commons has a particular context in history. The term commons is related to the common land and is mostly situated in the United Kingdom. It is defined as a shared territory where the land and resources are accessible to all members of a defined society. As the authors George Cafensis and Silvia Federici mentioned, in 1688, a fourth of the territory of England and Wales was communal. But after 2 centuries of enclosures, the tragedy of the commons, and at the end of the 20th century, the common lands were only the 3% of that territory. Capitalism and its products, the individualization of humanity and its priority for private property, had an impact in the decreasing of shared land. But, on the other hand, as a positive counterpart, over the last decades, the variety of commons has diversified in terms of what other goods can be shared, or even more interesting, what other actions can be shared. Therefore, this project related to lo común as a way or modes of sharing and commoning. As Cafensis and Federici mentioned, the commons are not only the means by which we share in an egalitarian manner the resources we produce, but a commitment to the creation of collective subjects, a commitment to fostering common interests in every aspect of our lives. In the last decades of the 20th century, in the territory now called Latin America, the understanding of the common as a verb and not as a noun has had different practices and discourses. The Mexican thinkers Floriberto Díaz Gómez y Jaime Martínez Luna coined the term comunalidad, or communality, to describe the communal practice in the subregions of Mexico. The authors Gustavo Esteva and Arturo Guerrero Osorio have described the term as the verb predicate of us. It names its actions and not its ontology. It refers to embodied verbs like eating, speaking, learning, perform collectively in a specific land. Also, the writer and activist Raúl Sivecki elaborates a similar idea that the common is a collective work by mutual aid, not the so-called common resources, because those are related to an economic paradigm, or neither the understanding of the community as an institution. In any case, the foundation of the common is the product of a collective action. So, in this project, we understand the common as an action, not only as a property. Museos en Común started 1 year ago. Multiple factors collided for this project to develop and evolve. The Jumex Foundation started in the 90s as a private collection of contemporary art by Eugenio López Alonso. And in the year 2013, almost 10 years ago, in a neighborhood called Granada, a museum designed by the architect David Chipperfield was built. Since its opening, the museum focused on getting to know their way of doing exhibitions, major exhibitions internationally and national exhibitions, and to understand the public that visit the museums. So just to tell a little bit of the context of the museum, in one of our best days, we received 6,000 people per day. And one of our least good days or a bad day, it could be like 1,000 or 2,000 people that visit us. So we already know how to handle this amount of people that visit to the museum. But with Museos en Común, it's our intention not only to stay for the visitors who come to the museum, but to take the museum out of its physical space, out of its walls, and to take the museum away from these physical boundaries, and to share with the neighbors and with other communities that normally don't visit us. So the project started by walking the streets near the museum. And this is a project that has been developed by the educational and curatorial departments of the museum. And after a couple of months to getting to know the place where we have been since 10 years ago, we located the place we wanted to work with. This place that you have been seeing image is Mercado Granada. And we have a couple of reasons why we wanted to work with this museum, with this market, I'm sorry. First, the location. It's 15 minutes walking from the museum, from a pedestrian street. They have a communal area that it was built to have like a communal space to eat together, but is under use. And the third, the community that is part of that market. So it's a market that has been from 60 years in that location. It's already 4 or 5 generations that have passed through. And so through visiting the market every Thursday and dialogue with the people, we notice a kind of important things. First, there is a community of kids that works, that after school, they play in the market. Second, the communal area that I already mentioned. So we start understanding that the only people who have time, because the people who work in the market is always busy, they work basically 7 days a week and all day, but the kids have kind of time. So we started doing workshops with an artist and an architect.
Mobiliario será el que dará cabida a la serie de programación pública.
Okay, I think we can watch the last part of the video and then I will continue. Thank you. I thought I was going to do at the same time, finish my text reading and then put the last part, but it didn't go that way. So then we realized that these two factors, one, the population that we were able to work with, and then the communal area. So we are, again, talking with the kids, and I think it's very important what you mentioned, to not only to do a project for the kids, but with the kids. So we start working in a co-designing furniture, the furniture that you saw in the video, and for this spatial communal area of the market. So it had certain characteristics. That has to be a space for play for the kids, a space also for people to sit, relax, and eat, and also a space for not only kids but also for the tenants of the market and the clients of the market. So we set up in probably 6 to 8 months co-designing this furniture with the kids. And then we did this that we call the celebration, that basically most of the people we had been working with have never been to the museum. Even though it's very close, it's not something that they do, no? There's always a question that, is it expensive? Does it cost? Even though it's a free museum, it's not something that they do. So this celebration was for them. We did like this public walk from this street that I mentioned before. There's a pedestrian street. So we make this celebration, bringing one of the furniture in a symbolic way, connecting the market to the museum. And at this moment, the project, it's an exhibition. So we are showing the furniture to host also a public conversations. And also we invite other artists to make a sound piece, a performance, and a costume related to their experience in the market. So all of the artists and the architect who work in this project has been spending in 6 to 8 months in the market in order to get to know the community and also the market itself. So this celebration that happened just the 8th of October was this welcoming that we wanted to give to the market people into the museum. So we basically give them a breakfast and a concert of a salsa band that they choose. So we make like a concert in the plaza, we make this all like performative walk. And so also this exhibition, that it's also a forum to talk about the common, also question the possibilities to build community from an institution. And as Linda mentioned, is it possible? It's still a question that we are dealing with. How can a museum can be decolonized? How to make it more accessible? And how to share with other communities that normally don't visit us? This is only like the first iteration of the project, and it's just like a starting point for a future relationship between the community of the market and the community of the museum. So today also in the Museo Jumex, we are hosting a conversation about common places, and we have been having conversations through the last 2 weeks, and we're gonna extend it 2 more weeks to have this public program that revolves around what is common places, knowledge, share knowledge, and also common actors. So we want also to be this a project where the Museo Jumex also learn how other practice has been done in the past and how this other practice has been done well in order for us to learn and continue this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Marielsa. With this interesting approach, linking communities with cultural practices and vice versa. And when it was this sentence, common places, common actors, common learning, and common knowledge. Now, we are open to if someone has any question or asking our panelists something. Carlo will bring the.
Where?
Hello. Thank you very much, everyone, for your very enlightening presentations. I have a question for Rina. In this process of developing the manual for the teachers, did you realize that there were some kind of universal aspects that could be applied to teaching in other regions? Or maybe it would just be a feeling that it could be applicable to, applicable to other regions also, not just this one here.
Well, yeah, actually, the manual is designed in such a form. It took 1 year of not only research, but we piloted it in schools. We got feedback from students, from teachers, from pedagogues of schools in order to kind of perfect it in a sense so that it actually fits for also, in general, just educators, not just teachers and the school environment. Last week, we actually tested it in Napoli, in Italy, and it worked perfect also in that kind of environment with a bigger age group, it did exactly what it's supposed to do in a sense, let's say. So it's designed in such a way that it's concise, it's very easy to follow, it's like a step-by-step guide, what you should do, how you should maintain contact with your group, with your participants, and how to guide them to kind of explore the neighborhood. So it's very flexible. You can also get a copy if you want and to check it personally if you feel like using it also with your group in general. Did I get your question right?
Yes, you did. Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah,
Thank
I would
you.
love to. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Hi, so this question is for Mariela. It was very interesting to see how you're establishing a connection with the community outside the museum through this walk. Any ideas on the next step?
Thank you. I actually don't know if I mentioned, but the furniture that we built, it's for the market, not for the museum. I don't know if that was clear. No, okay. Yeah, probably I forgot to mention. Okay, so the furniture that is now shown in the museum, it's for the market, for that communal space that we that they have in the market. And as I mentioned, this is only like the beginning of the relationship. This furniture will be activated by the workshops, and also we already have the second idea to develop with them. So this first idea to develop the furniture was decided by the kids of the market, and now that the parents of the kids have realized that it's something that it's really going on, they ask us if the next step could be to design like the logos of each of their local, each of the like each business. So we are thinking of inviting also artists and designers to do that. We also have another idea that we have to discuss with them, because obviously this is not a decision that we can take without hearing them, what do they want. And so the next step for this will be the 4th of November, we place the furniture in the market. We will continue activate with workshops. So every Thursdays, we go with the educational team, myself and other artists, to give workshops with the kids and adults too, if they want to. And then we'll start working in next year for the logos, and probably also We have an idea of working with it. It's a market that, so they do a lot of deliveries in bikes and bicycles. So what other idea is to work with them and to have like workshops about how to fix very easily a bike, but also how to design it in a better way, more useful, the bikes. That's for now in terms of the relationship with the market, but we already have another market that it's also interested in working with the museum, which I think is great in order if we can expand a little bit more the community. Never stop working with Mercado Granada, because I believe that this community project has been like long-term processes, and I hope we can work with Mercado Granada probably 10 years, if that's possible, if they want to, but not only to stay there in that community, but also to expand a little bit more around the neighborhood of Museo Jumex.
If you can please introduce yourself before doing the question.
So I have a question for Linda. Thank you so much for your presentation. We had a feedback from many of the visitors from Manifesta that there's so much thought understanding the context of Kosovo, Prishtina, the historical past, and you refer to the Walter Benjamin. How do you create this atmosphere of the past inside, let's say, the narrative or the curriculum of a future museum? Why is the museum not yet set? What is, let's say, the boundaries or the barriers you have to take? Because I think it's such a crucial instrument of understanding the past and learning from this for the future. So how come, and maybe it's not your question to you, but to the municipality or to the minister, what takes the municipality not to establish this museum?
I think that intents of doing it were really genuine from the municipality and the ministry. In particular case of Hertica House School, it is that it's this private-public divide. This is a private house that was donated to the municipality, but only the house. All the architects agree that the house itself cannot, because it was severely damaged and burned, as you saw, cannot be reconstructed. So some of the solutions of some architects a year and a half ago was to build around it, maybe just widen it 2 meters and then build on top of it, which I personally thought was an excellent solution. But then the family, it's also, I think, to be very blunt and honest, because I cannot do differently, it's also this persisting dominant narrative of the sort of the family, of the ownership, of how the narratives are told, which I think becomes problematic. And in this sense, it becomes a problematic because this, it needs to expand a little bit, it needs to be built on top and to exist on top, and it becomes, so it's a little bit, the family is really pushing for the school to become a museum. The communities, the former students are as well. Municipality is very willing, but when it comes to actually doing it and how to do it, it becomes, becomes problematic. And I think it's also because it was severely damaged, and we have to think about how to really use these buildings that are completely damaged. This is why for me it was like VR and virtual museum can maybe be like a solution or a temporary thing, and we were playing with that. I mean, we did VR mostly because we felt through our research that students really, in order to learn and know, they really want to be emotionally involved and affected and in the center and engaged. And so they don't really want a museum that is static. So I think that this becomes also how, this discursive power of curating it and deciding is very much out of our hand. This is why we were trying to do and build all this knowledge around it so we can share it. Everything we did is accessible for the public and usable. But I think it's really on ideas of how it should be that we have struggle negotiating with.
We were talking before about this challenge of this digital museum that you of this to create, making a museum and to keep alive, in a sense, all this multiplicity of experiences that you passed through your period and the others in this Hertica schoolhouse.
I mean, this is important of having this kind of venues and this kind of talk across different places globally. I mean, when I was doing the research and looking at, for example, District 6 Museum in Cape Town, looking at all these new forms of communal, community-based museums was really the inspiration because, and especially in this school, it's like 10 generation, it's everybody who's in their 40s, in their 50s, in their late 30s had been through this system, so we all feel like it's a part of our story. We all feel like it's a part of our experience, so we want to contribute. So it becomes also a challenge to do this sort of narrative shift of how the museums have been, or especially how national museums are being thought of, locally and globally.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I introduced myself before. Marielsa, I have a question for you because you completely captivated me with the statement that on a quiet day you have 1,000 visitors and on a busy day up to 6,000. So firstly, I was interested in the demographics behind the 6,000. Who comes to your museum? And I'm also interested in, is there any flow once you've been doing your actions in the marketplace? Do you find people also then coming into the museum after that?
Thank you. Yes, well, the Museo Jumex has a lot of tourism. It's located in the neighborhood that is very popular for tourism. And we are in front of the most visited museum in Mexico City, that is Museo Sumaya. I don't know if it's the most, but one of the most. So we have a lot of public that go to Museo Sumaya and then visit us. We have major exhibitions, like our last exhibition was Urs Fischer or Andy Warhol of Jeff Koons, these like blockbusters. So that's why we have a lot of public. Yeah, so basically tourism, but also the art community in Mexico City. I think at this moment, it has passed 10 years from the opening of the museum, and at this moment, I think the museum it's already an international museum, well known in Mexico. The second question, it's what's the main purpose of the project? If we have, for instance, a second or third or a fifth visit from the community of the market or neighbors from the museum to be part of the project, is that the project has succeeded for me. We just have like this party for them, and we have been doing like public activities, also inviting the market people. They have come to some. But I think that answer I will have, like if we pass, I don't know, 6 months and we still see the people of the museum, of the market in the museum, is that we did something good. Also, another thing is that all the project, as you can see in the video, has been done in the market, not in the museum. So that's the thing that we wanted to to also have some programming in the museum now in order for that people to come and visit us.
Is there any other question? We encourage also the people following us virtually to write their questions in the chat, and we will read them out loud here.
Hello, my name is Tilda. I'm from Denmark. My question is for Rina. I was just wondering, in doing the research and speaking to the community and developing these programs, both did you, and to what extent did you experience maybe a difference in what the different generations wanted and were seeing a lack of? And do you in general experience that there is a generational gap that can become perhaps a little bit difficult to manage when it comes to, you know, learning about arts and, like you said, learning to appreciate art? Do you think perhaps that generational gap can become bigger with the youth wanting to know and be exposed to more art?
Thank you for your question. Actually, the research process was quite an interesting process on gradually how we went through it, because we developed it gradually. So the more we did, the more people we met, we saw that we need to adapt our methodologies to get exactly the information that we wanted. I mean, we experienced, for instance, this difference of opinion. Exactly, this was the point when we understood that if we want to make a project for youth and for children, we have to talk to them directly, because we were getting information which are for children and are absolutely miscommunicated when we're asking the teachers or the school directors, for instance, and we got totally different information when we talked directly to the students. So also the methodology of the research kind of developed gradually as we went along it. And absolutely, it made a huge difference also on the co-designing and co-development of the project of schools project, for instance. So we understood that also what we needed to do is get feedback also directly from students, not only from teachers who would be the ones to actually implement this manual, but also directly from the students who would want to be part of these activities, because we can have a successful manual, but if the students don't like it, then there's no activities that are going to be implemented. So we noticed this huge difference actually when it came to who we were talking to and what for. In terms of your second question for art consumption in general, what we understood is that perhaps there's no generation gap in terms of appreciating art, but perhaps the interest of what kind of art young generations like and what kind of art older generations like differs. So this is kind of maybe the component which also influenced us to rethink our strategies in general on how much technology has influenced also the understanding of art, the understanding of different and implementation of different education methodologies, and why is it such an important aspect to be more flexible around it and with it, and to adapt our educational methodologies, especially when it comes to art and culture, to the times and the needs of the youth and these generations which are active now in the society. So this is, I think, yeah, this is basically the differences that we noticed. But absolutely also maybe something which is important to mention is that the mediation team, for instance, has done an incredible job to kind of bring audiences from different ages to understand contemporary art, because this is also something which is not super common in Kosovo. So older generations might appreciate a lot more, like, I don't know, let's just say like painting or cultural heritage and so on. But when it comes to updating the art, to contemporary art exhibitions and so on. There was a lot of work which needed to be done to kind of make them understand the cultural context, the artist per se, and so on. And I think this was also a critical point, what made the program of Manifesta quite successful, because all of the venues are public institutions, are public buildings which have history engraved in them. So it was a link also to young and older generations at the same time.
Not so much giving like only a kind of an overview of what contemporary culture can be, but it's more like instigating a critical discussion. Can you say something about the outcome of this critical discussion for the community? Because maybe for Marielsa also a question. You said, well, why are people not coming to the museums, the high prices? We did a large investigation why people are not investigating and coming to the museums, and what's the relevance of cultural spaces are. And we got like an outcome, the Alba Mall. The mall is the place where people in general go to look for culture. So it's also about bringing a different narrative, creating different mediation tools, bringing people from the communities into the museums, and creating maybe different language in which this mediation, but also the criticality. How can mediators bring a critical dialogue towards inside a museum, but also towards from the community, what they expect a museum in the future could be?
This was quite an important point when we thought about, when we discussed also internally within the Manifesta team on how to choose the mediators, basically. That was kind of the most critical aspect. And this was exactly the discussion that we had, that all of the mediators, which were students initially, they come from totally different backgrounds. So they're not all of them who are art professionals or who have studied art or culture and so on. So some of them are dealing with psychology or anthropology or architecture, or so fields of, different kinds of fields. And that was exactly our idea why we wanted to have this totally different and variety of views also infused within the mediation practices and throughout the guided tours which are offered. So in a sense, if you get one tour from one mediator, you can have a different kind of experience, because they have this freedom also to develop their own narrative of the artistic works, and in relation also to the history. They spent 6 months doing a lot of research research for all of the Manifesta venues, research for all of the artists, and they brought also their self as an important component on how to integrate all of this information to offer the visitors and the audiences the narrative that they believed that was crucial to be conveyed. So in a sense, this is why I think they have the freedom to they had the freedom to explore a lot also within their professions in order to bring as many variety of narratives as we can to fit different kind of audiences and public groups.
A bit too late, actually. Just to add about the question, for us, it's not like the number of visitors, because we do have a lot, but it's who are we wanting to extend like the web of the museum. And also I think for us in this project in particular, Museos en Común, what we are trying is not just them to visit us once, but to build like long-lasting relationships with our communities and with the public. I believe that it's important we have like visitors. We do check that box, but what is more important for us is to have a public that it's engaged with our exhibitions and with our public programming. And also I believe that in this particular case of Museos en Común, in the community of Mercado Granada, the major barrier for them, it's time. They work the entire day. So in order to put together this celebration, they had like a month ahead to had someone to work for them that day in order for them to can leave the market or their business for just half a day. So in these communities, what we have noticed is that it's also part of how capitalism has worked in the way that they don't have time for museums. They don't have time for entertainment. No, they just work and work. And also, I believe museums in general can create sometimes some barriers with certain publics. No, so museums, as you mentioned, are we know that. Yes, of course, and it's also the aesthetic of the museum. No, this is a beautiful museum, but it's also kind of impressive because it's all of marble, very like pristine, beautiful design, but that's probably not welcoming for everyone.
I have a question, a follow-up question, because now I'm interested a bit. So having as many tourists and having as many people and creating this connection between Museo Jumex and Museo en Común, did it in a way or another also affect so that to the increment of the standard of life of the people who are working in the market? So they wouldn't have to work as much, for instance, or did it have kind of an effect also in economical terms?
No, not really. I mean, that would be great, but to be honest, no. I mean, we had like all the workshops that we have done, we buy the things in the market. So we try to help a little bit with the economy of the market with doing these certain things, no? Or we invite some of the clients and also people that work in the market to give workshops too, so we can pay some amount. But I don't think we're there yet, but that will be great for our next step.
Hello. Thank you very much. This is Alex Fisher from Harvard University. I have a question for Linda Gusia. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was particularly struck by your comments around reclaiming and really shining a light on the agency of students during this time in terms of producing a student newspaper, holding rock bands, things of this nature. Speaking about the teachers of the schoolhouses, I would imagine that the curriculum had to change quite a lot from when they were teaching in school buildings to when they were teaching in schoolhouses. Could you speak a little bit about the agency of teachers during this time and how your work is trying to shine a light on that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. It's very important. I think that in this capturing the aura, one of the very important thing is to make people imagine of what it is like to be crammed, 40 people. In the beginning, we sat on the floor. It also creates this sense of solidarity. It creates a different kind of teaching mode. Our teachers really try to be strict because for them it was proving the standard that this is also a school. We are not just make-believe or pretending. So for them, it was this other pressure of actually teaching us something, which was very hard in this, because this also creates a sense of informality, which is something that I think that the 90s in Kosovo did create this in general, in sort of this collective spirit, this sense of informality, this sense of, so it created that, which was very difficult for them because they had, as you could see, like cramped small rooms, and they had to be very strict on how they execute. We also had wonderful teacher like Nazim Leshi, who was our Latin Latin teacher, and Latin and French, and he was the inspiration. This is something that maybe as a teachers, we really need to reflect on what one teacher can do. He really insisted that this small room that didn't fit for any other uses could be turned into this space that he would bring us book and a computer, and then we can all start our newspaper, which was really all about STDs and sexual life, nothing political. It was very weird when I refound them and reread them, and it was like, okay, priorities when you're a teenager. It was this sense of teachers didn't get paid for like more than a year. They then had a very low salary. I think that this is what is important to also emphasize, is that this solidarity and communality, and this sense that we all contributed. This is why this school and this museum should be different, because everybody participated. This is one thing on the history of Kosovo that is really, everybody got invested. We went to school, our parents made small chairs and tables, our teachers came and really tried to be interesting and try to navigate the informality of our school and our new setting. So it's important to do that. I found in my research that schools like this happened in South Africa. They were not as consistent because we never stopped. We started in January '92 and we never stopped. That was really functioning sort of institution. But you see in Afghanistan, you see in Ukraine now, in all world, you see this commonality. And I think that this universality becomes important also to share through personal stories. Like, our students really loved that personal connection. They loved that we dress. They imagined, like when we started looking at archives for them, it was like, oh, 1990s, ancient history. And it's like, oh, you dressed like us. Okay, yeah, you dressed like us, not us. So, it's really this affective that becomes really important, but it also, as researchers, also becomes important to critically think of what it produced. It produces informality. We had classes for 30 minutes. We didn't have access to books. As you say, curricula for 2 years really tried to stick with our curricula in Yugoslavia and then change. We didn't have books, really. So we had to take notes of what our teachers were saying. So it was all these struggles that created big gaps in our educational system that we cannot really amend right away today as a teacher. You see, for me, it was so strange after the war just to enter any kind of space that is not a room or a house, because it was this, I grew up in the 90s completely segregated and completely avoiding every public big space. So this place, Armata, I remember from the 80s, but I had no access to this place throughout my teenage years in the 90s. So it becomes important to, as teachers today, to be aware, to kind of talk about that, but also talk about not just romanticizing that, also talk about what it created and the problems it created about this, around the system today. So I don't know, I didn't answer your question, but yeah, teachers, we interviewed a lot of teachers in our attempt. We really wanted those stories to be heard, and we interviewed also former students, and we really wanted to shift the narrative, just to be, because teachers had completely different narrative. They were so worried. For me, it was also a revelation of how worried and how dangerous, they had these kids in this illegal schoolhouse So they were also responsible for us and worried about us. So it really through the interviews and through the research that I also personally realized something that I didn't realize being a student, that they had this responsibility also about how we go home, do we arrive safely home, and what happens to us. So I think that should come also as a story. But we had wonderful teachers who, with really the force of passion and conviction, really carried this system through.
Hello, my name is Marianne Wagner. I'm coming from Münster Sculpture Projects. So actually, I would like to ask all of you, but maybe just to address someone, my question goes to Marielsa. I really think this is a great project, and as it is running now for months, I was wondering if you had the opportunity to establish already some strategies of archiving all the actions you're doing and all the activities which are running, and especially the public reactions, which are really difficult to archive. So this is something which interests me.
Yes, fortunately we have recorded in video and photo most of the process from the beginning of how we start doing the workshops with the kids until right now that the public program is held in the museum. So we have like a very broad material of information of all the process for a year now. And most of the material, it's in the webpage, obviously has been like curated and edited. But yes, I do believe that it's very important, the archives and this like communal and public process, because sometimes you need to see like other processes in order to, you can learn from things that have been done in the past, like how things had been wrong or good. But yes. And we really value the archive or the collective memory that this project can be organizing and also showing to other people that it's interested in.
Archiving is very important, I think. Digitalizing becomes also important. But also rebuilding these physical spaces and these spaces where people come together as a community. And I think that your project really illustrated that the importance of this communal and coming together. And I think in all of our efforts of engagement and teaching and producing art, you know, this communal and building the communities around it really becomes crucial to what we do, or it gives meaning to what we do. Because, I mean, in academia, as you know, we talk to 5 people, 10 people, if you're lucky, and they read your papers. But we talk to a small group of people in our research. So this is a way, I mean, for us who are, I think also, this goes to you, for people in this part of peripheries and located in this kind of geographies, for us, our work has to be full circle. Our work has to have meaning to us and the community. It's not just done for the research or a promotion. It really, because when you engage with the research, it is part of your life. It is part of, it needs to matter. It needs to resonate not only in your paper, not only in your classroom. It needs to resonate in the communities. And I think that increasingly we are thinking about these new pedagogies and how to, how to expand the classroom. So I think that becomes important in also all our endeavor,
Hi, I'm Anna Bromley. I'm a participant of Manifesta, an artist. You can listen to A Voice Exists in Voicing on the website. I have a question to all of you. I liked, Rina, Linda, how you said, how you pictured a museum of resistance and resilience. And I got somehow stuck with Marielsa saying it's about the aesthetics of a museum that creates barriers. Well, no, I grew up in a steelworkers community. My parents went to the factory in shifts, and I was one of the kids that, you know, were brought to the museum as like the marginalized publics, I guess. And I must say, I really, like, I can only provide my perspective, of course, but me and my friends, we liked how the museum looked. It wasn't about the architecture or the aesthetics. It was more about the sound, you know? Like having to be quiet, not to react emotionally, react in a bourgeois code of self-disciplining bodies. I think that was more what I find still difficult in museums, you know, even as somebody who now is part of this whole scene or world and with an academic training. I feel like it's all about self-disciplined bodies. And I wonder if you have clues about it. Marielsa, you talked about the sound pieces that were done on the market. I would be curious to know more about that.
Sure, thank you. And I do agree there's a lot of barriers that is not only how it looks, but also how it feels. And there's also intellectual or physical barriers that a museum can engage with the public to have them inside of the museum or outside of the museum. I really like what you say about it's about the sound. And how the body it feels in the museum. In this case, and thank you for asking for the sound piece. So when Museos en Común is a project that has been developed in a very different way that it has its start. And this is because we're working with a community, no? You cannot predict how it's going to end. But we had certain idea that we wanted to have something inside of the museum to tell the story about the community of Mercado Granada. And also, as I was telling before, this museum has a lot of visitors. So for me, it's great that some visitor that comes to the Jeff Koons exhibition in the Museo Jumex also can see the story of Mercado Granada, no? So I really like this variety of the museum that can host very, very different projects. So the sound piece, it's part of the exhibition. So it's a kind of exhibition scenography for the public program. But what we wanted to do also is to the artist that we work with, that is Israel Martinez. He's also a Mexican young artist. We invite him to stay and had workshops in the market in order to get to know the sounds. So it developed into a beautiful sound piece. It's 18 minutes long, and it's about all the noises that you can find in the market. For instance, how it's someone making a new key or chopping the meat, or Juan Gabriel, which is a very famous songwriter of Mexico, sometimes, or salsa and rock. So you have like all different sounds that if you have ever been in a Mexican market, you definitely recognize the sound. So I think it's beautiful that you enter to the gallery, see this furniture, but also you can feel like the sound of the market inside of the museum. That was the point of also showing this art pieces that are related to the market, to have like to the people who goes to the Museo Jumex to see James Coombs' exhibition, they also can learn about how a market sound.
Maybe shortly, just to add about the sound, I think that the sound really set us into a more effective, emotional. We are very, in our culture, we are very visual and, you know, visual, we live in a visual culture. So to kind of shift it into something that is more sensory and shift it in the sound really helps also to reframe how we think. I found that a lot when we were using found sound and other methodology with sound with our students. It really also creates the shift that you cannot do with words, or, you know, you can talk all the time that, oh, this is visual, and how we see is also culture, then our aesthetic is formed by our class, experience, whatever. But the sound really sets into, I think, more subconscious, so. And memory. Yeah, and memory.